All right, move out. Let's go. Keep it moving, lads. To the right.
In the sweltering summer of 1944, a weary freight train ground to a halt amid the vast, golden fields of Kansas, its engine sighing like a beast finally at rest after a brutal journey. Clouds of steam billowed out, mingling with the dry prairie dust that danced on the hot breeze, creating a hazy veil over the makeshift platform, a simple stretch of weathered boards laid across the sun-baked earth. The entire structure vibrated from the final screech of brakes and the rhythmic clanks of metal links settling along the cars. Once the clamor died down, an eerie quiet took over, broken only by the soft creaks of expanding steel and the uneven rhythm of wooden supports and walking aids shifting impatiently. The doors slid open with metallic groans, and uniformed sentries barked gentle commands. "Steady there, no rush, move at your own pace." Their voices carried the soft assurance of caregivers rather than conquerors. From the shadowed interiors of the boxcars emerged figures who had once embodied the fury of battle but now resembled survivors from a shattered world. Their outfits, faded and crusted with ocean salt from the long sea crossing, hung loosely, buttons undone, badges stripped away. Many bore fresh wraps around skulls or limbs, hobbling forward on crude props or leaning on fellow captives who were just as frail. Some lacked limbs entirely, their belongings slung over shoulders by those who could still manage. Among them was Corporal Heinrich Bauer, a 32-year-old engineer from the Panzer divisions, a man who'd fixed tanks under fire in the African deserts, now reduced to a precarious lean against a cold rail. Where his left arm once was, only a bandaged remnant throbbed with each bump. He'd steeled himself for jeers, for rough handling, for the raw triumph of those who'd bested his side. But the first voice that reached him was warm and unassuming, laced with a flat heartland drawl. "Hey buddy, want some support getting down?" A U.S. private waited at the base, arms extended like it was the most ordinary thing. Bauer blinked in confusion, then accepted the aid, feeling the solid warmth of the grip, a stark contrast to the chilling dampness of the ship holds they'd endured across the waves. The Kansas heat hit like a wall, heavy with scents of parched soil, fresh-cut grass, and the subtle aroma of ripening crops under an unforgiving sky. Insects buzzed in the distant groves, and the sunlight glared off every surface, highlighting scars and makeshift bandages in sharp detail. Beyond a basic fence stood a fleet of army green vehicles emblazoned with bold red crosses, their crews bustling with purpose. Attendants directed the newcomers with even tones. "Over here, watch that step, we'll sort you out soon." The arriving men traded wary glances, whispering doubts. "Why bother healing foes like us?" Bauer anticipated being shoved into lines, stripped of identity, turned into mere statistics. Instead, a young medical officer, fresh-faced and efficient, jotted his details on a form with deliberate care, adding casually, "Forget the titles for now, we're here to fix what's broken." An interpreter related in choppy phrases, and Bauer could only dip his head in acknowledgement, words failing him. They guided him onto a transport already laden with other battered souls, where metal mugs of cool water awaited on the seats. A legless infantryman muttered, "This must be staged for their newsreels, to parade their so-called decency." Another, gazing at the endless horizon of farmland, countered softly, "If so, they've mastered the performance." The vehicles lurched into motion, kicking up plumes of earth that swirled in the intense light. Far off, a modest banner fluttered over pale structures, Camp Harmony, run by the U.S. Military Health Services, though its real name echoed in records as Concordia, a haven amid the plains. The watchtowers rose modestly, more like rural grain elevators than fortresses of intimidation. As the group passed the entrance, a sentinel raised a hand in routine respect, no sarcasm, just protocol. No one reciprocated, unsure of the rules in this strange limbo. The ramps lowered, and a team of caregivers, nurses in practical uniforms and aides with carts, stepped up immediately. One captive breathed, "They handle the maimed as if we belonged to their ranks." The idea felt almost disloyal, yet it hung in the air. Entering the main facility, rays of light streamed through spotless drapes, illuminating rows of crisp linens, warm covers, and even pitchers of fresh dairy on side stands. The air carried hints of antiseptic and cleanliness, a far cry from the stench of dread they'd known. For veterans of devastated battlefields in Europe, transferred through holding pens in Allied territories and then shipped over stormy seas, this serenity seemed otherworldly, like teleporting to a realm untouched by conflict's scars. The layout unfolded in precise patterns, even paths of crushed stone, checkpoints spaced uniformly, clusters of light-hued quarters aligned with disciplined symmetry. From the air, It mirrored any standard American training outpost, barriers secure, emblems centered proudly. Yet within those boundaries dwelled the vanquished, over 4,000 from the Axis forces, part of a larger diaspora of hundreds of thousands dotted across the nation's heartland. This particular site, nestled in the rolling wheat expanses of northern Kansas, specialized in the conflict's most vulnerable remnants, the physically shattered. By mid-1944, captives from the European theaters had been ferried over in protected fleets, valued as much as strategic supplies. Regulations stemmed from the 1929 International Accords on Warfare, mandating fair handling and equivalent health care to that of the host's own forces. America's defense authorities elevated this further, viewing benevolence not as vulnerability but as a testament to superior values. Every aspect, from work rotations to recovery units, aimed to highlight the gap between tyranny and fairness. This ethos shaped the very buildings. At the core stood a healing center marked by a massive crimson emblem visible from afar. Airy rooms harnessed the open winds, inclined walkways eased mobility for those on wheels. Adjacent spaces housed fabrication areas, stocked with components, molds, belts, and rolls of treated fabric. No enemy broadcast had ever depicted such a setup, part medical hub, part community forge. Routine existence here was structured yet humane. Sunrise calls roused everyone, overseers and detainees alike. Meals started the day, reconstituted proteins, hearty loaves, robust brews laced with sweetness. Those fit enough ventured out escorted to nearby ranches, filling gaps left by enlisted civilians. The permanently impaired stayed on site, given roles suited to their capacities. A one-handed clerk managed correspondence, a vision-impaired keeper organized reading materials. Days filled with purpose mended the voids left by collapsed doctrines. The standout feature, however, was the limb replacement lab, a symphony of restoration in motion. Staffed jointly by captives and hosts, technicians, woodworkers, healers, the space hummed with saws slicing, rasps smoothing surfaces. From salvaged plane parts emerged joint mechanisms, from worn vehicle treads, durable bases for faux feet. Experts gauged each case with rulers and empathy, chuckling at initial mismatches, tweaking until perfection. The paradox hit hard for arrivals. The adversaries who targeted industries now reconstructed independence using their rivals' discards. The concept of renewal gained a deeper resonance, unspoken yet profound. Personal correspondences, vetted but sincere, captured the bewilderment. "We learned they'd conquer via technology alone," one noted. "Yet their inventions heal rather than harm." Another reflected. "They don't scorn the fallen, they guide them back upright." These weren't shifts in allegiance but admissions of disarray. Their upbringing tied vitality to heritage purity, but here aid transcended origins and dialects. Beyond the enclosures, residents followed intrigue over resentment. Local agriculturists observed ex-opponents threshing grains alongside their kin on leave. They marveled at the adapted ones operating machinery, mechanical extensions clutching controls with unyielding precision. Occasional invites to meals crossed barriers, names mangled, but warmth needed no lexicon. When whispers of funding care for foes stirred debate, publications countered firmly. "Our nation combats barbarism by rejecting its mimicry." Meanwhile, inside, returning U.S. fighters sometimes visited with provisions or skills-sharing sessions. They engaged without grudge, swapping light-hearted tales via mediators. The detainees scrutinized these figures as living proofs of societal attitudes toward the afflicted. Back home, such individuals were sidelined, erased from public view by decree. Here, mobility aids paraded freely in civic events, symbols fluttering from grips. Witnessing this openness dismantled ingrained biases more effectively than any lecture. Records from an aid worker on duty in autumn 1944 survive. "These men gaze in wonder as I assist with their devices. One inquired if my family approves of aiding adversaries. Another murmured, 'You're disproving everything I was taught.'" Evenings brought tranquility. Sentries lounged with periodicals as the sun sank in fiery hues over uniform crop lines. Aromas of baking wafted from preparation areas to the healing zones, where individuals practiced strides on crafted supports and sheer determination. In that golden haze, mixed with grit and subtle warmth, loss gradually loosened its hold. The once dreaded combatants of a toppled regime became pupils in the art of decency. As colder months swept in abruptly, the flatlands hardened under ice, transforming soil grooves into stark, frozen ridges. Within the compound, the dawn signal pierced frosty exhalations and the sharp taps of aids on slick paths. Fabrication continued unabated, elements heated by furnaces, materials emitting scents of lubricant and effort. Jests flew that the gales served as trainers, demanding equilibrium against every blast. Corporal Bauer adapted to the cadence. Progress came in increments, refined supports, better alignments, reclaiming balance bit by bit. A fair-haired U.S. fabricator named Jack Harlan led the sessions. He'd sacrificed digits in fierce engagements, and adapted with agile remnants. His tool taps echoed like pulses of life. "You don't need a limb for respect," he'd quip. "You need it to move forward, so let's ensure it does so with dignity." Initial chuckles were courteous. Soon, they grasped his sincerity. He took ownership of their advancements, correcting stances, easing discomforts, celebrating each fluid motion across debris-strewn floors. When Bauer achieved a seamless walk unaided, Harlan's applause rang out like a victory signal. "There you go, pal, that's the echo of peace settling in." That evening, in the stove-warmed lodgings, discussions veered from nostalgia to enigmas. "Why restore our abilities if we're rivals?" one pondered. "Perhaps for labor value," suggested another. A third whispered. "Or simply because it's possible." They lacked terms for uncalculated generosity. Subtle inversions piled up. Off-shift overseers joined games of sport with the ambulatory, rooting for feats regardless of sides. The health director orchestrated seasonal gatherings blending homeland melodies with local anthems. When artificial parts creaked amid cheers, the assembly only amplified the noise, like a chorus of absolution. By early 1945, evaluators from high command arrived, including Major Ellis, a seasoned healer from frontline duties, bearing the weight of exhaustion in his posture. He documented observations, conversed briefly, then called for demos of improved movement. Bauer volunteered with others, traversing the space in turn, their engineered components syncing flawlessly. Afterward, Ellis stated plainly, "These individuals are ready to reclaim existence." Intended practically, it resonated as enlightenment among observers. That day, a group of U.S. war wounded from a distant facility joined, attire casual, marks visible, aids adorned with emblems. Their leader flung a ball skyward, snaring it with a hooked device. "Master this in half a year," he bantered. Laughter broke free, authentic and bridging divides. Shared wit transcended borders, endurance bonded them. The visitors circulated, exchanging stories through go-betweens. One paused at Bauer's station, praising his workmanship. Noting the extension, he remarked, "Mine's standard issue 2, holds up better than old gear." He offered a smoke, ignited it via his adaptation, and they shared in silent parody. Over time, the evolution deepened beyond physical fixes. They'd been indoctrinated that power equaled control, imperfection a societal flaw. Now, they beheld the winners honoring their impaired with esteem. Billboards in nearby settlements depicted reintegrated fighters thriving in industries, under banners of collective resurgence. The idea that worth endured flaws reshaped their core convictions about the cause they championed. In a lone journal, Bauer penned a line that endures. "In this place, a person unable to fight remains part of the whole. True might lies in uplifting the fractured, not abandoning them." He emphasized it repeatedly. Yet kindness bore a bittersweet edge. Longing for origins intensified. If foes could rebuild, what of their ravaged lands? Tales of shortages, ruined facilities, neglected casualties and hideouts spread via hearsay. The irony gnawed liberty thrived in confinement, while ruin loomed outside. With warmer seasons melting the grounds, scents of damp earth and growth filled the air. Fresh arrivals integrated into agricultural teams, their enhanced limbs carving neat trails and tilled fields. Daily patterns mirrored civilian norms. Some watchers grew lax with storage, and trust prevailed without incident. One dawn, a seasoned local producer neared the boundary with fruit offerings. He lobbed them across, declaring, "For those who mend and labor." The recipients gathered them graciously, torn between offense and gratitude. The flavor burst unexpectedly, mirroring how grace had pierced their defenses. By midsummer, the landscapes thrummed with insect symphonies under relentless warmth. Hostilities in Europe had ceased, their homeland lay devastated. Bulletins relayed it sparingly. In the enclosure, the news met with hushed contemplation, no jubilation, no sorrow, merely the deep breath of endurance. The rehabilitated found new purpose. Transports ferried them to harvests, where adapted forms baled forage or secured boundaries. Communities observed from afar, amazed how normalcy absorbed old fears. Corporal Bauer led a small unit, traveling with peers and a relaxed escort. At a halt, a farmer's spouse presented chilled beverages clinking with frozen cubes, a novelty that left him transfixed until her chuckle broke the spell. "Sip it quick before it vanishes," she urged. The sweetness overwhelmed, leaving him speechless. Such small gestures, devoid of enmity, outweighed grand pacts in impact. As autumn neared in 1945, directives for return emerged. Priorities debated: send the healed first or delay for fragility? Logistics decided, vessels prepared, and those mended departed equipped. Each got a packet: release papers, fresh adaptations, and courtesy supplies from relief groups. The eve before leaving grew somber. Exchanges occurred at perimeters: handmade trinkets, tools, undelivered notes. Jack Harlan presented Bauer a customized implement etched with marks. "For keeping things aligned," he said. "Even the best need tweaks." Bauer clasped it firmly. Dawn brought formations once more. Vehicles idled at thresholds for checks and final gestures. No orations, just dawn rays glinting on barriers, steps echoing on inclines, motors revving like renewed pulses. As the lead healer bid adieu, Bauer stood firm on his upgrade, stating in basic terms, "I stride thanks to your efforts." The man tipped his cover, shielding against brightness. "That's the core of it all." Returning. Overseas, their nation reeked of debris and fumes. Urban areas appeared chaotic, markers gone, structures riddled with damage. Officials greeted with paperwork and reserve. The gleaming aids stood out against the gloom. Youths gawked, some teasing. Yankee upgrades. Initial barbs faded to quiet honor. Navigating ruins on steady footing felt prophetic. Soon, Bauer secured employment in a rebuild initiative backed by recovery funds. His gifted tool dangled handy. Questioned on retaining an adversary's relic, he replied, "It reminds that foes can prioritize advancement over vengeance." Ideology faded. He spoke of adaptation, the calculations to unify disparate elements. For the hosts, the approach influenced doctrines post-barriers. Documentation of effective, kind rebuilding circulated as models and care systems. Legislative talks on support invoked these efforts as evidence that organized empathy succeeded. Facilities repurposed for everyday folk, no longer rivals but fellow rebuilders. Now, mere outlines of Camp Concordia persist, scattered bases amid grasses sighing over hidden conduits. Beneath lies the outline of an unusual success: triumph through ethics over savagery, upkeep over spite. In that central outpost, those anticipating degradation encountered harmony. They discovered that where power extends aid, setbacks commence recovery. The subtle win of our shared essence isn't dominance, but the bravery to restore. Often, amid palms binding an outsider's injury, true harmony ignites even as battles rage on. For more untold stories like this that reshape how we view history's turning points, check out WW2 Impact, where the echoes of the past reveal lessons for today. 1.8 Sexpert